What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. This is the final episode of Part of the Problem before the election. I should point out, we got a few things, business, that we got to get to before we start today's show. First and foremost, let's start with the headline. Our own Robbie the Fire Bernstein's debut comedy special premiered last night. It is up, available for free on YouTube. It is phenomenal. I had just said to you before we started the show that I was looking at some of the responses. I try my best to not live in internet comments in general, but there are occasional things where I want to go see how it's being received. And just overwhelming, what people loved the special, a lot of positivity. It was actually very cool. Because, we do have our own little world, our own little community here, but people are loving it. So thank you to everybody who's already checked it out. Of course, if you haven't already, make sure to go do that. With all the craziness in the world, enjoy a great comedy special. And congratulations, Rob. How are you doing?
Thank you, sir. It's nice to have that out, and now I got the daunting task of putting together the next one. But it's nice to have that out and to already be seeing some good reception from it. So happy thus far.
Yeah, no, it's a cool moment.
And this is me happy. Can't you tell?
Yes. Well, you have to understand, it's a cool moment, Rob. You put out a piece of art and it's well received and people love it. And then, of course, you're going through the moment now where you realize that your life is just as empty as it was a week ago, a year ago, a decade ago, and that no matter what you try to fill the emptiness with, nothing will ever truly fill it. But that's a whole separate conversation that we can have. Maybe you and your shrink will work that out. But the point is the comedy special is great. So yes, everybody, if you haven't already, go check out Rob's special. It's fucking so funny. So goddamn funny. I'll tell you, it's weird because, there's this is a little inside baseball about stand-up comedy. And I promise you, we'll get into talking about what's going on in the world. And we have a fun episode for you guys today that will be irrelevant in a few hours. But there's a lot of guys stand-up comics who, when I started comedy, when you first start, you're just doing shows in New York City. You'll do as many as you can in a night. So there's guys who you watch all the time because you're always doing, you might have done 6 shows together last night. You watch them develop their act. As you start becoming a headliner, when you start going on the road, you do a lot less of that. And you don't see those guys, now, if I ever do get the chance to watch one of my friends do stand-up, it's usually I have no idea. This is all new material to me. I haven't seen any of your stuff in a couple years, The exception to that is when you tour with someone. So me and you have been touring together for many years at this point. And so I've watched you kind of craft this special. And there's just something, I remember talking to you when I was filming my first special, Libertas, and me and you talking about it the week leading up to it. And I was there's almost, you feel a little bit you're kind of happy to put the material out there, but there is part of you that's almost it's like saying goodbye to an old girlfriend or something, and you're just all right. And it's very weird. I kind of had that feeling for you watching the special. I was oh, all right, there goes that bit, that was such a staple. And they're all right, well, it's out there now. I don't know. It's there's a weird feeling, the relationship you have with your material. And I weirdly feel I have that with your stuff too, just because we work together so much that I'm just I remember that literally is when the special started. I'm that's solid Nazi bit, man. It's all right. There you go. You're out in the world now, Nazi bit. You feel you it's you nursed a bird with an injured wing, and then when you put it on a special, you're fly, go fly, little Nazi joke. You're okay now.
It's weird because I've discovered that once you've filmed it, you have no interest in telling it.
Yeah, that is true. Once you filmed it, you're just yeah, I can't. Well, it's you buried it now. That's, you know what I mean? You said goodbye to it now. It's you can't go hang out with it again. It's you just, sent your girlfriend off to college and you went off to a different college. Then, it's oh, listen, we're going to go see other people. And then she'd be hey, you want to talk on the phone for 2 hours tonight? And you'd be no, why would I do that? That's the bad part. Anyway, sorry, glimpse into my cold sociopathic heart. Okay, the other thing I should mention real quickly is that, and this was 100% my fault, I apologize for the miscommunication. The episode I recorded with Scott Horton yesterday will be out today. This episode will be out tomorrow. So that episode I did say was going to be live, but it wasn't. My apologies. I never communicated that to Natalie. It's squarely on my shoulders. But we will get both of these episodes out to you before before voting. Well, I guess voting's already started. Before the official, polls are open. Okay. Couple other things, and I promise I'll be done very soon. Don't forget, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow morning to go down to Fort Lauderdale. I will be on the Patrick Bet David podcast, their live election show. Looking forward to that. Bunch of big names, they got this, I don't even know if you could call it a venue. Patrick Bet David is just a goddamn boss. I think from what I understand, he showed it to me last time I was down there. But he bought an airport. Seems to be when you're successful on the level that Patrick Bet David is, you have options that are things that never even occurred to any of us. He's basically Rob Bernstein with hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, just instead of a porch, he's like, how about we do it in an airplane hangar?
Must be an airplane hangar, yeah.
Yeah, it's like in a hangar. It's gonna be bonkers. I cannot wait to get there. I think Candace Owens is on it as well. I'm not sure who else is on, but it'll be a cool group of people, and I'm very much looking forward to that. And then got some big shows coming up this week. I'll leave it at that, but there's going to be some big ones. I've had a very big year, and we're going to close it out here this week because I'm not traveling for the month of December. I'm not traveling for work for the month of December, I should say.
With the big shows, you better hope we actually get election results. Otherwise, it's awkward to show up and be like, well, yeah, you guys want to talk about that election that's not over? You want to have me back in 2 months when they make a decision? There's always enough stuff to talk about, but yes, I'm hoping we have the results by the time we're doing some of this other stuff. But anyway, takes a long time to count those corpses, Davey Smith.
That is true. It does take a long time to count all of the corpses, the illegals. There's a whole lot of votes we got to pile through. And then I just should mention, because I just feel like we've been neglectful in promoting it because it's such a crazy week, but Friday and Sunday. Friday will be in Poughkeepsie. Sunday will be in Philadelphia. ComicDaveSmith.com for all of those ticket links. Come out and see me and Robbie the Fire in Poughkeepsie and then in Philadelphia. All right. Can you believe it's finally here? The time has come, and I don't think maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I think we could pretty reasonably say that's it. That's the election. I don't think there's going to be any more assassination attempts or big news stories that are floated out there. In a way, and okay, I'll put a caveat here. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe something happens, and we got to jump back on for like an emergency podcast or something like that. But we are, as of right now, as we're recording this, it's 1 p.m. on November 4th. There would be no point if you had a juicy surprise story saving it till now. And I don't think there'll be more live events and stuff like that before the election. So I don't know, Trump might have a couple rallies till then, but I think security will be pretty high up on these. So in a sense, we can, without any of the results, look back a little bit on the election, certainly on the last few weeks of it. And I don't know, Rob. I mean, I don't know. I'm curious to get your thoughts, what you think going into it, how you think this is going to play out. I will say I'm a bit surprised by how weak the corporate media's fourth quarter was in all of this, and how it did seem like it was almost like it was revealed that they just didn't have any more tools in the toolkit, and that in fact you've seen all of them. They've played every hand they had. Obviously you're dealing with people who could do other things, but I suppose they decided that the calculation was not in fact worth it, and that they would risk losing the entire country if they tried again. But it seems like that's it. And who knows? Maybe the other trick up their sleeve has something to do with those corpses you were referring to, Rob, and we will see. But I don't know. What are you thinking at this moment?
It just seems to me like this is in the books for Donald Trump. And of course, I can be wrong. And of course, maybe there is more election rigging than we could expect. But I haven't heard a new story, a new argument, a new policy from Kamala Harris. It seems like it's just been more of the same over the last 3 weeks. And the energy for the last 3 weeks has been, wow, this Donald Trump's really exciting and this Kamala Harris is really a dud. And I haven't seen anything otherwise.
Yeah, Scott Horton said to me on the show yesterday, as you guys will all hear or have heard already by now, but he said at one point, he goes, I mean, it is the most famous man who's ever lived running against some hoe. It's like, it just, the way he put it, I was like, it does, when you put it that way, it does sound right. No, I mean, as I've said, I think a few times on the show, and it's a bit of a weird situation. I don't know, if I had to compare it to another election, and when I say this, I mean, if you just like forget the polls, and just go off everything that you can observe with your own senses, like everything I can see and hear and touch and smell, and taste, I guess is the other one. I haven't been tasting anything, but really smelling anything either. But, if you're looking at like, people you talk to, crowd sizes, enthusiasm, what the candidates are doing, how the mood of the culture feels, how the culture feels. Now, again, I'm not claiming that any of this is scientific. Obviously, it's somewhat anecdotal and observed, happenings. But if you go by any of that, the only election I could compare this to is 2008. Between Barack Obama and John McCain. And I don't know if for those of you guys who are maybe a bit younger than me, if you don't remember, but of course, George W. Bush's administration ended in absolute disaster. He didn't protect the country on 9/11. We got hit with the biggest terrorist attack in our history in his first year. He then used that. Rather than going after the Sunni radicals who attacked us, he went to topple fought a 20-year, what turned into a 20-year regime change war against the Taliban in Afghanistan, and then launched a regime change war against the secular dictator in Iraq. Both groups were not involved in 9/11, and the wars ended up being disastrous and costly, and not just in terms of innocent lives, but money. Then there was also Katrina, in 2005, where he was, to be honest, I don't know enough about whether he was fairly or unfairly, but regardless, he was blamed for the handling of the response to Katrina, which was a disaster. And then the economy crashed, and we had the worst financial recession in 100 years. So by the time the Bush-Cheney administration is over, both of their approval ratings are in the toilet. It was like they had, I think, the lowest approval rating since they had been keeping track of presidential approval ratings and vice presidential approval ratings. They were done. You have Obama burst onto the scene, this young junior senator, just an incredibly talented orator and a talented politician, running on hope and change and yes, we can. And then you had John McCain, the also old Bush Republican, who was essentially running on a continuation of the Bush policies. And it was like everywhere you look, it was just so obvious. There's no question this guy is going down and Barack Obama's going to win. It was everywhere. And what ended up happening was exactly that. Since then, I haven't seen an election like that until this one, where it is just like by every tangible metric that you can observe. And again, I'm not saying that's scientific. It just seems like it's written in the stars that Donald Trump is going to win a blowout. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Proton VPN. Proton created Proton VPN to further protect the journalists, activists, and everyday citizens who use Proton Mail. Proton VPN breaks down the barriers of internet censorship, allowing you to access restricted online content. Proton Secure VPN sends your internet traffic through an encrypted VPN tunnel to keep your browsing data safe, even over public or untrusted internet connections. As a Swiss VPN provider, Proton does not log user activity or share data with third parties. Their anonymous VPN service keeps your browsing history private and enables an internet without surveillance. Proton VPN is available on all of your devices, including PCs, Macs, smartphones, even routers. The secure internet connection you can trust is essential to maintaining your privacy on your laptop at home, your mobile device on the road, or your workstation at the office. To check out an exclusive and limited time offer, go to protonvpn.com/Dave Smith. Again, this is a limited time offer, so go check it out today. protonvpn.com/Dave Smith. All right, let's get back into the show. Now, that being said, one of the differences is that when Obama was running against McCain, the polls also bore that out. When you looked at the polls, you would be like, yep, that's a reflection of everything that I'm seeing right here. This year is very different. And when you look at the polls, they tell you it's the closest presidential election of my lifetime. Anyway, I don't know really what else to make of that other than just saying it, but that is a very strange dynamic. But if you look at everything, and even down to just like these real cultural shifts, where it just doesn't seem to be dangerous to support Donald Trump anymore. It just seems like it's something that lots of celebrities and people in the public are doing. The protests against Donald Trump don't have the same energy that they did in 2016 or even in 2020. You watch Donald Trump, he's headlining Madison Square Garden, he's doing the Joe Rogan Experience, he's just, and the media and the Kamala Harris campaign, they just seem to be like cartoonishly bad at their jobs. That's everything I'm observing. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump ends up just winning a blowout here. At the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if this thing goes the way 2020 did. I said this yesterday. I think it kind of feels like, like when they'll talk about like a jury trial, it seems to me like the quicker this takes, the better it is for Donald Trump. Like if we have results of who won the presidency by 11 p.m., Donald Trump won the presidency. That seems to me to be, or at least it largely favors him. However, if this gets drawn out into days, into weeks, who knows? Who knows what could happen?
I think also the fact that newspapers have decided not to endorse Kamala Harris is very telling. That at least they aren't so overwhelmed with fear of the Democratic Party and staying committed to that cause that they realized it's better for business to remain neutral, because the gamble of Kamala Harris actually getting back in is they're looking at the risk reward and they're like, there's no reason to piss off Donald Trump and endorse this lady.
It seems like that. It seems like something, or there's just something where it's almost like a fear of like, guys, we look, like you had a moment, okay? And obviously there's other factors involved in this too. I'm not pretending this is the only factor.
But it speaks to the weakness. If you just think about the compliance of what we saw like over the last 6 years with ESG scores, and when Bud Light first decided that they wanted to put Joy Lady on as an ad spokesperson, the way that brands got involved in politics, and you're like, why would you want to alienate your audience? Brands were across the board pledging allegiance to the Democratic Party. Tech censorship was rampant. And the fact that at least at the moment, the tides are turning, that they don't feel like they have to pledge allegiance to the Democratic Party, there's something very telling about a lost power there.
Yes. Well, look, if you look back to think about the first, or I should say the only debate between Trump and Joe Biden this year, right? If you can remember back to that, going into the debate between Trump and Biden, the media narrative was that he's sharp as a tack. And that anybody who's pushing this, oh, he has dementia, is that's cheap fakes. If you remember, it was a far right wing conspiracy, and that was going into the debate. 2 minutes into that debate, they all knew they had to abandon that. You know, they all knew. And when it came, by the time the debate was over and it came back to the media desk, we were living in a new world where none of that was true anymore. And look, there may have been, and there probably were, several forces that played a factor in that, right? And that was their opportunity to dump Joe Biden, okay? However, a major factor in that, you just cannot convince me otherwise, a major factor in that was that even for CNN, even for MSNBC, they had reached a point where they were like, we cannot sell this to our audience anymore. Like, even our audience is not going to pretend that they saw no issue with that debate. They're just not going to. If you remember back, like if you can remember earlier in the year, last year, they would, when Joe Biden, if you remember his last State of the Union speech, they got him all hopped up on drugs, and whatever cocktail they give to him to get him to be able to read words off a teleprompter, they gave it to him. And if you remember, we were joking around about it at the time, Rob. He came out, the first half hour of his speech, he's like angry, because that's what Joe Biden turns into when he's hopped up on all the Adderall or whatever the hell it is that they give to him. In other words, he knows he has to like overcompensate for being weak, and like his only way to do that is to go, that's right, Donald Trump wants to take away your, you know, and like, so that, and then after like a half hour, you could see the medicine start to wear off, and that's what he started getting a little bit more sleepy, and he stumbled a little bit more in the second half. However, he pulled it off. He gave a speech without, you know, disaster. And so the entire media would spin that, oh, he was amazing, he was great. Like, he gave them enough that they're like, okay, we think we can spin this to our audience. After that debate performance, there just wasn't they're just like, listen, if we run out and do this, not only will our audience not believe it, but we'll just be discredited forever in front of our audience. We can't do that. And it does seem to me that there's a very similar dynamic with things like the Washington Post not endorsing Kamala Harris. They know they want to. They know they want Kamala Harris to win, and they don't want him to win. But they're looking around and they're going, listen, dude, we just can't. We can't with a straight face tell our readers. I mean, look, when you go to the Washington Post, you have to understand listen, the Washington Post is garbage. Don't get me wrong. It is garbage. But the people who read it can read. You know, like, it's not a TV show. It's a newspaper. You got to pick up a big old newspaper and actually read the words that are written in ink. Like, I'm saying you have to have a 90 IQ. I don't know. Like, it's not like it's all dummies reading the Washington Post. And they just kind of know, they're like, we can't actually, you know, metaphorically look our readers in the eyes and tell them that the woman whose answer to every single policy question is, I grew up in a middle-class house, has our support. At least to me, that's what it seems like a lot of. It seems like a lot of like people resigning themselves to the fact that they're still going to have to exist on November 6th, on November 7th, in December, in January, in February, like that they're still going to have to exist. And also that, look, if Donald Trump is in there, then they're going to have a new task, which is, you know, being the propaganda arm that undermines the new president. And so I think that there was almost like there's too much cultural pressure for them to feel comfortable to come out and endorse her. That's my read. Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Guys, if you've been considering therapy, maybe you're putting it off for some reason, but maybe there's something in your life that's kind of telling you, I really could use some help from a professional on this. Let me tell you two things real quick. Number one, I highly recommend it. I've benefited from therapy in the past, and I know lots of other people who have as well, and it can really make a difference. And number two, let me tell you that the absolute easiest way to do it is to sign up with BetterHelp. BetterHelp is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient and fit your schedule. It's designed for a person like you to make entering therapy as easy as possible. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. All you do is you fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/problem today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/problem for 10% off your first month. All right, let's get back into the show.
I mean, it makes perfect sense from like a bell curve perspective, but I think nearly 15% of the Washington Post dropped their membership over it. But that means that 15% of people were going, hey, we're in on a LARP here where you don't give us real news. We just pretend to read the news here, and you tell us the Democratic thingy things that we want to read. You tell us that, you know, trans is real, kids can be trans. I don't know what they cover in the Washington Post, but you get what I'm saying. We want to read the Democratic talking points, and you're supposed to put it there in the paper, one of the papers of record. I'm assuming Washington Post is the third biggest paper in the country after New York Times, Wall Street Journal.
You know, I'm not actually sure about that. It's an interesting question. They're up there for sure. I'm looking that up as you say it.
Well, they're one of the credible papers, and for nearly 15% of their audience went, hey, if you're not going to be entirely on board with the Democratic agenda, we were not coming here for honest news or opinions, so we're out. That's why we were customers.
It says they're the sixth biggest. I guess the LA Times and the Chicago Tribune are still in there. And they said the New York Post beats the Washington Post. So there's a little note of optimism. But anyway, your point still stands. Yes, one of the biggest. And there's also a difference between, you know, like the New York Times may only be a little bit bigger than the New York Post, but the difference in terms of like how they're treated or how they're viewed by the regime, like Natalie found one that says they're the fourth biggest. So you might, it might be depending on how they measure these things. But the regime moves by what the New York Times says. The regime does not move by what the New York Post says. Oh. And likewise, the regime doesn't really move by what the LA Times says, maybe a little bit. They don't really move by what the Chicago Tribune says, but they do move based off what the Washington Post says. So like there's other ways to measure it too, where there's no question that in terms of like influencing powerful people, there's three. It's the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post.
I'm a big fan of the New York Post. I me too. I used to read the physical paper every day in high school. That was the only thing, I read at that time. Now I read the website, which is not the same. It doesn't have everything, but I scan the website every day. The New York Post I love the New York flavor because it's like the Donald Trump of newspapers where
it so is. Perfect way to put it.
It's brash. It's not appropriate for what a newspaper is supposed to be. They take it too far, but at the end of the day, they're giving you the news and it's a little bit more entertaining than the other ones.
And probably more accurate. Not saying it's accurate, but probably better. You're probably better off just reading the New York Post than reading the New York Times.
There's some topics we would hate them on, like Israel. Their reporting's atrocious, yes. But
no. Yes. But then again, the New York Times is only one click better. The New York Times is better on Israel if you really do the reading, like if you really make sure to read the good pieces. But I mean, there was a ton of stuff that was reported in the New York Times. The what you could call the October 7th disaster porn. Like all of the allegations, all the claims that turned out not to be true at all, that they just ran as if they were true. The beheaded babies and the gang rapes and playing soccer with people's heads and stuff, cutting the baby out of the pregnant woman's belly. Like there were a ton of, and by the way, October 7th was pretty goddamn horrible. You don't really need to exaggerate it, but there were a bunch of claims that were made shortly after that all turned out to just be completely nonsense. And anyway, so yeah, they're not great on that either. Okay. So one of the fun stories over this last week, and I gotta say, I really enjoy this. No matter who wins this election, or no matter maybe who is installed in the White House on January 20th, I think it's tremendously beneficial every time that the media humiliates themselves. Like, I just think that's great. And, you know, a lot of times I think people don't, they don't appreciate the cumulative effect of all of these times. And, you know, the fact that, like, if you look at, say, like the trust in media today compared to the trust in media in the year 2000, in the year 2001, in the year 2002, you know, it's gone drastically downhill since then. And a huge part of that is, like, okay, the media lied us into a war in Iraq. That has lasting consequences. It's not like a lot. I'm not saying some people forget about it and move on. A lot of people don't. And likewise, you know, I brought this up on the episode with Scott, but I had gotten in a little bit of a Twitter argument with Michael Tracy and Robbie Suave about this. But I don't think, this is my prediction, and we'll see if we get to figure out whether I'm right or not. I don't think the media is going to get a big boost in ratings under Donald Trump's second term, if he has one, the same way they got in the first term. There's just, things are different now. It's not the same situation. This is not 2017 anymore. And it's not, you know, in 2017, they were able to draw big ratings largely because of the Russiagate nonsense. And because they were pretending to have the biggest story in the history of the country. You know, like, which is
the president's a Russian asset. Talk about I mean, that's a movie right there,
dude. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, right, when I say it. If true, what they were claiming was the biggest story in the history of the United States of America, by far the biggest scandal. Nothing even close to it. That you're telling me that a foreign government hacked our democracy. And you know what I'm saying? Like, this is where the people on the media, they all used to say it's bigger than Pearl Harbor. Well, if they were telling the truth, it was. You're telling me the Russians overthrew our democracy and installed the current president of the United States of America, who, by the way, was in on the scheme? He was involved in a conspiracy with them to overturn the results of our election and install a foreign-backed dictator. You know what I mean? Like, this is the biggest story ever, if true. And, you know, I was talking about this just the other day, actually, with my wife. We were just talking, like, at some point, it's like we were just hanging out in our bedroom after the kids were asleep, and she said something, the topic of the Russiagate thing came up, and I guess they tried to use it in some way the other day, and she was like, she goes, how did anyone ever buy that? You know, like, and that was, which is like you know, like a fairly reasonable question. Like, she's just going, like, and she's not like me or you. Like, she doesn't obsess over politics the way we do. But it's that time of year, you know, and like everyone's thinking about it, and she is married to me. But she just goes like, you know, like, she's just looking at it like just a regular person. Let me put some sane eyes on this. And she goes, how did anyone ever believe that Donald Trump was a secret agent of Vladimir Putin? Like, we've known Donald Trump. He's been the most famous man in the world our entire life. Like, what? And I was saying to her, I was like, well, look, here's the thing, right? As ridiculous as it sounds, if you don't know that our whole system is based on lies, like if you haven't been red-pilled to the point that you realize that it's all fake, the whole thing is fake. If you don't realize that, look, you got what they were able to do, Rob, as we've covered very well here, right, is they were able to say, hey, there's a special prosecutor who's been appointed to this, and he's investigating this. So right away, to, you know, Joe Sixpack, if you're just looking at that, you go, well, it's got to be somewhat credible, right? I mean, like, if the Justice Department has deemed this worthy to sick a special prosecutor on the president of the United States of America, that's got to be at least something.
And big lies are ballsy, where they almost seem more true.
Yes.
And so
right.
If you keep repeating it, and then the regime is treating it seriously and sticking special prosecutors on, and your whole life you've been led to believe that the news organizations are just telling you the news and they constantly repeat it. So unless, you know, it's easy to have lived through these experiences, then lived through COVID, or if you were informed on the Iraq war and look back and go, oh, these people are obviously liars. But, you know, that's in a 2024 perspective. You got to go
Right.
back 8 years where we didn't live through them so blatantly lying to us.
Well, look, and so say, right. So, but exactly. But my point is that if you haven't realized the whole thing's fake, you'd go like, well, look, dude, if the Justice Department has decided that they need a special counselor, then, or a special investigator, then, I mean, they wouldn't just do that based off Hillary Clinton's opposition research lies. Like, it wouldn't just be that. There'd have to be something more to it. Now, of course, again, once you realize the whole thing's fake, you realize, yes, no, they actually would do that just based off Oppo research lies. But then on top of that, so if you don't know that, you're like, okay, first off, they have a special investigation. And then you go, hey, I just saw on the television that the chair of the House Intelligence Committee came out and said, I have seen the evidence and Donald Trump is going to be indicted. I just saw the former head of the CIA director came out and said Donald Trump and his family are going to be perp walked in cuffs on national television when Mueller concludes his investigation. And they did this for years. They did this for like 3 years. And so it actually isn't that unreasonable for a regular person to have looked at that and been like, I don't know, dude, there's something here. Like, I know, okay, great. These two like jerk off comedians, Dave Smith and Rob Bernstein, are telling me this is all bullshit. But like, I don't know. I'm watching grown men in suits and ties on my television explain to me that this is real. And again, it's like, to your point of like going in on the big lie, part of the reason of why that's effective is because people do have some tendency to go like, I mean, they wouldn't just make that up. You know, like you hide behind the decency that other people project onto you and go, no one would just make that bold of a lie, right?
Or it's an Overton window play where you, in your head, go, well, maybe that's a little extreme, but maybe the middle ground is more that he's just dirty or has some favors that he owes to Putin. Like, maybe he's not actually a Russian spy, but maybe there is some sort of a problem here. So
yes.
That's where the big lies, work on people.
Which, again, this is, by the way, this is like basically the entire regime's like strategy, right? Like, I mean, if you think back to some of this stuff, you know, it's like, you know, when they'd accuse people like me and you of wanting grandmas to die when we opposed lockdowns. Meanwhile, the people accusing you of doing that were knowingly shipping COVID positive patients into nursing homes while they yelled at you. It's the old thing. I know Tucker Carlson said it a bunch of times. It's that they punch you in the face. And as soon as they punch you in the face, they go, hey, you just punched me in the face. And to a normal person, that's like disorienting. You're like, I don't even know whether to be mad at you for punching me in the face. Like, wait, what? You're accusing me of punching you right after you punch? It's very bizarre, but it works. It's effective for a while. However, so just like with the weapons of mass destruction lie that they pushed, it wouldn't have been easy in 2006 or 2007 to say, well, look, what are the long-term consequences of pushing this war based off lies? And I'm not saying it's the only thing, but if you look 10 years later when the corporate media has all but collapsed, you go, well, that's one of them. At least that's in part the reason for that. And so anyway, my major point that I was making the other day on this was that I don't think they're going to be able to recreate that with Trump in office again. And I don't think that, you know, so several things have happened since then. And one of them is that the Russiagate story got blown up to be complete nonsense. They're very damaged by that. And then, of course, the other one, and there's many, there's the Hunter Biden story, there's a lot, but the COVID one is just so damning. And I don't even think like, you know, even though obviously we've never gotten the chance to run the experiment that we desperately needed in this country, which was to have some type of referendum on COVID, I gotta say, a huge part of the reason why Bobby Kennedy blew up so much over the last year, why he's in Trump's orbit right now, a huge part of the reason why Joe Rogan's having Trump on now, so much of it is about COVID, man. So much of it is that after COVID, there are so many people in this country who will never look at the media or the political class or the scientific establishment the same ever again. Ever again.
And if you look at the lies that they're going to try and push, I don't think they're sellable. So I guess the first one might be day one, democracy's over. But what happens when it's not?
Yeah,
and,
what happens when we have midterm elections?
Yeah,
you know, like,
he's never going to give up power. And people are like, I don't think he's in 4 years going to just remain president. Or if he decides he wants to actually get us out of the Ukraine war, which remains to be determined. I'm not so convinced. But let's say he does. What are you really going to sell the American people on, that Russia's now going and taking over all of Europe and that this was the biggest foreign, you know what I mean? Like, how's that like going to play out for you 3 months later when that's not what happens and we're actually in a better place? Or the most interesting one, and also remains to be determined, because typically speaking, I say bet on boring. But if RFK Jr. actually gets put into some sort of a health position and they start exploring rolling back childhood vaccines, or
you'd be like, oh, you know, look at this. Cutting back on big pharma corruption doesn't actually mean all of our kids have polio now. Wow, look at that.
But I could see the media trying to go, hey, look at it, this is dangerous, and trying to take the side of big pharma. But that's almost like when, you know, at some point when things get pulled into the limelight, such as, hey, we got to bring down the prices on X drug. It's very hard for the media to go, no, we need this drug to be this expensive. Yeah. So at some point, if we're really exploring some of these health protocols, I can't imagine that the media wants to have an honest conversation about it, because if you start digging in, you're going to start noticing some problems. So I don't even know what the freak out. You can't say unfit for office because he already did it. And so I don't know why he'd be more unfit this time. They keep trying to sell us on, well, he's too old this time around, which is laughable after the Joe Biden years. I'm tired as a performer. I'm a little sick, and I do weekends. Donald Trump does a rally every day at age 86. I don't know how he does. And he does an hour and a half.
Well, not 86, 70.
Whatever the hell he is. He's in McDonald's years, though, so he's older. But younger at the same time.
It might make you younger. I'm not sure, dude.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm telling you, dude, Donald Trump has single-handedly given me the best argument back against my wife whenever she tries to make me be more healthy. She's just like, do this. This is better for you. And I'm like, is it? Or is this just going to kill me younger? Or maybe I just got to go like down into the subways in New York City and just roll around in the dirt and just let my system be strong. You know, like I can fight off anything. Scarf down some Mickey D's.
I think Donald Trump has actually advocated against exercise, that you have finite amount of energy and you're blowing it for no reason. I think I've heard that attributed to him.
Could you imagine if there's a scientific breakthrough and we find out that's right, and that all these people exercising, you're like, yeah, dude, you're just robbing yourself of future energy.
My back and joint hurts. It might even be accurate.
But so the dynamic that I think that's going on here essentially is that I think the media, the corporate media, is dying a death of 1,000 cuts. Some of those cuts being very, very big cuts, and COVID being probably the biggest. The wars being very big too. And so, no matter who's going to win. And I still, listen, even as we're saying this here, I still hold on a little bit to what my initial prediction was in this, which is that they simply will not let Trump in. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. Things certainly have changed. I will certainly grant that over the last month, your prediction that they're just basically going to have to accept that they lost seems better than mine. You know, we will see. However, regardless, whether Donald Trump ever gets into the White House again, or if it's Kamala Harris, that the media's continual death spiral is more important to me than any of it, because that is the propaganda arm of the regime, and that being taken down is a necessary prerequisite to anything positive happening. And so that to me is the most important. So it's in that vein, it's with that in mind that I got to tell you, because we've never really, I think we made a couple jokes about this. I had a joke on Twitter that went real viral about it, but I cannot tell you how much I loved the Liz Cheney story. This was the quintessential microcosm of everything good that Donald Trump does. And he does it without even really doing anything himself. He does it by just being this unfiltered clown that he is, and just saying the thing that's on his mind. And then letting the media freak out and lie through their fucking teeth about it, to then only be left with like looking at it and going like, yeah, there is a good point there though. Right? So it's like, not only did they fucking lie and get exposed for it, but then at the end of it, you're left with the point that Trump made, which was like an enormously important one. And he probably doesn't even realize how important the goddamn point he made was. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device. So it's not like vaping. This is like you get actual clean, good flavored air. It's not, if vaping was like a sticky soda, Fume is like a cup of herbal tea. It's a great device and it really helps quitting bad habits. I've used it myself a bunch and it's been very, very helpful. I know a bunch of people who have quit their bad habits using Fume. Check it out. Fume draws flavor to your mouth. It fills the void that ditching a habit can leave. You still have something to reach for, and you can fidget with it. It's got magnets and movable parts on it, so it's real good if you get restless or you have a little bit of anxiety while you're quitting. It just really helps. It's like it's designed perfectly for giving up your bad habit. It also just looks really cool. You don't need batteries for it. It's always there and ready to go. And most importantly, Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, if you use my promo code, which is PROBLEM, you'll get a free gift with the Journey Pack. So head on over to tryfume.com. That's TRYFUM.com, and use the promo code PROBLEM to get a free gift when you order the Journey Pack today. Check them out. Fume has a lot of success stories. You could be next. Tryfume.com, promo code PROBLEM. All right, let's get back into it. But anyway, let's play. We have a couple video clips of this to really appreciate this, because this was actually, like, I think one of my favorite stories throughout the election, and it came right here at the fourth quarter. So let's start, Natalie, with the first one that I sent you, which is the tweet, the montage. It's from Maze at Maze Moore, which is a great Twitter account. Let's check that one out.
Breaking news. Donald Trump took his violent rhetoric to a new extreme, suggesting the former Republican Congresswoman should be fired upon.
Breaking news. Trump under investigation for saying, quote, war hawk Liz Cheney should be fired upon.
Right now on ABC News Live, he suggested 9 barrels of a firing squad aimed right at her.
Donald Trump declaring before a crowd that Cheney should be put before a firing line.
With the battle over women voters raging, Donald Trump suggests putting Liz Cheney in the firing line.
Now you have this threat against Liz Cheney that Trump is talking about a firing squad.
The Drudge Report, Trump calls for Cheney execution.
He's saying quite explicitly and unambiguously that Liz Cheney should be shot, should be executed by firing squad.
He directly said what he thinks should happen to Liz Cheney just because she disagrees with him.
He basically called for executing Liz Cheney.
Talking about putting Liz Cheney in front of the firing squad.
He actually suggested that Liz Cheney should face a firing squad.
Guns being trained on a political opponent.
Guns being trained on a political opponent.
He would like to see guns aimed at Liz Cheney's face.
9 barrels pointed at Liz Cheney is the latest escalation.
Using the military to kill a political rival.
We've graduated to firing squads and execution.
He really wants to kill with a firing squad his political opponents.
Sounds like to me he just thought she needed to die.
Trump was suggesting a firing squad.
Evoking images of a firing squad, of an assassination. What's your response to Donald Trump saying she should be fired, that Liz Cheney should be fired upon?
Donald Trump's closing argument has been Puerto Rico's an island of trash. I'm not a Nazi. Liz Cheney should be in front of a firing squad.
He's talking about a firing squad for his political enemies.
A firing squad, a military tribunal.
Talking about sending a prominent Republican to the firing squad.
He's imagining and in some sense kind of getting off on the image, the idea of Liz Cheney being put in front of a bunch of weapons and having them shot at her.
I'm just kind of confused about the hyperventilating around this on the right. He literally said rifles being trained at Liz Cheney.
And this is both the rhetoric and the imagery of Stalin. It's intended to be about death.
He's talking about training a rifle at Liz Cheney and a firing squad. My God,
Who does he want to kill if he becomes president?
So for him to call
for Liz Cheney to be set up before a firing squad?
Firing squad, essentially, or something, for a political opponent.
Liz Cheney needs to be in a firing squad.
You're talking about a firing squad for Liz Cheney.
A firing squad for a fellow Republican, fellow American.
Put Liz Cheney in front of a firing squad.
Mark Milley was his Joint Chiefs of Staff chair. John Kelly was his chief of staff. He now wants to put those same people before a firing squad. No matter how loyal you've been in the past, it doesn't matter. Stephen Miller feels safe now. But let him look at Donald Trump sideways one day, and he'll be the one Donald Trump is saying should be before a firing squad.
If you were busy today and you only saw the headlines, you may be under the impression that the former president called Liz Cheney, called for her to face a firing squad. The former president was actually mocking Cheney as someone who, pushes for war from the comforts of Washington, D.C.
She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. When the guns are trained on her face. They're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy.
Dave, you seem to be muted.
Oh, sorry about that. So isn't it something? Isn't it something to watch that? And then at the end of it, they show what he said. Now, to be clear, what Donald Trump said, there's a term for it. Trump probably doesn't even know this, but there's a term for it, which is called a chicken hawk. And this has been in the, the political, this has been inside of the Overton window for many generations, that people criticize the people who are constantly pushing for wars, but will never see action themselves. You know what I mean? Aren't going to send their kids. It's not going to be their family. There are millionaires who have lived incredibly privileged lives. Somebody who was the daughter of Dick Cheney. And yet they're always advocating that other poor young men have to go, make the ultimate sacrifice. It is not only an excellent point, but by all standards, a completely reasonable point to make. And one that, ironically enough, you would have heard out of the mouths of Democrats about the Cheneys just, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, for sure. This was even over 10 years ago, you might have heard this. This was a very standard critique of war hawks who don't themselves make any sacrifices. And yet you can watch, just think about this, right? This is why we always say, you never hate the corporate media enough. I know Aaron McIntyre has a great post that he always tweets about that. It's something along those lines. You may think you hate the corporate media enough, but you don't. You don't hate them enough. And that's true for all of you listening. There's never enough. There's not enough contempt in the world to have for these people. Think about that montage of how all of those people, every last one of them, lying through their fucking teeth. Lying through their teeth. They all heard it. And they'll all get up there and look in the camera and just bold-faced lie to you. Just tell you that he was saying that Liz Cheney ought to be executed. That's not what he was saying at all. He's saying, let you be the one that has to go fight these wars, and we'll see how quickly you stop advocating for them. That's obviously the point he's making. And all of them are just totally, this is the only thing, right? And this is what I said when I called out Chris Cuomo at the beginning of my debate with him before I took his soul, is that, look, you're in the game where your currency is the truth. That's the entire currency. And that's not just true for the corporate media. That's true for this show too. That's true for any time you get in the realm of talking about these ideas. Your currency is the truth. The idea is that you're not lying to people. And if you are lying to people, then you have to be totally dismissed. The currency here is the truth. And yet all of these people, just because it's the last week of an election and they want to hurt him, they will lie through their fucking teeth to you. And I got to say, I love stories like this because I do think that it's they don't even realize. It's no, you're dying a death by 1,000 cuts. And every last one of them is self-inflicted. And you're just inflicting yet another one on you. So keep going. I love it. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Monetary Metals. I've been telling you about this company for a long time. I really love these guys. They are revolutionizing the precious metal spaces. Gold prices have been breaking all-time highs in 2024, and now you can get your gold to work for you, generating interest income every month paid in additional ounces of physical gold. So there's been people who were investing in precious metals in the past, but now you can invest in precious metals that yield returns in those same precious metals. You can earn up to 5% on your gold and silver in their latest offering, and accredited investors can earn double-digit returns in their bond offerings. Again, all the interest is paid in ounces, which are stored for free on your behalf. So if you're tired of your gold and silver collecting dust at home, or even worse, racking up fees having your metal professionally stored, check out monetary-metals.com to learn how you can start putting your metal to work for you today. Monetary-metals.com. That's the site to go learn more about this amazing company. All right, let's get back into the show.
I call it, it's like Amelia Bedelia the news, where they try and, it's just fake outrage over things that should not be taken literally. And speaking to your point of how they're all liars, it's like right out of Boiler Room, where the guy hits the floor and he goes, all right, we're selling this stock. And so in this case, they hit the floor and they go, guys, firing squad. We're going to say that Donald Trump's saying that he wants to kill Liz Cheney and it's a call for violence. And they all get on the news and it's just like being on a sales call and they go, can you believe a person would say firing squad on another politician? This is the violence that will exist in Donald Trump's America. And it's everyone in their little sales tone just getting on the air, repeating the exact things that came from higher out up, which was Donald Trump, violence, end of democracy. It's all over.
Yep. Just more of that. However, it does, again, it's like you can only go to this well so many times. And it's like they're trying their best to empty the well.
Well, it's just, it's gotten too cartoonish. I don't know how you continue going from here. I really don't know. Like, I understand how people were suckered by the Russia collusion thing because you never saw the base evidence. In this case, who watches that video of Donald Trump and then watches the way the news anchors are treating it and doesn't just laugh at them? Who, you know what I mean? I don't know who can be, unless it's kind of what I was describing of the 15% of Washington Post voters that are like, hey, we're in on this LARP and we don't need to play clean. You know, it's the people that liked the Donald Trump court cases when they were happening. They knew that it was absurd, but they were like, win however you can. We don't like this guy. So, you know, maybe there's still a core group of viewers who are in on the LARP who literally watch it like pro wrestling and they're watching their mischievous cheater character cheat and they like what they're doing. They're like, oh, this is a fun storyline. Maybe this will help. But my guess is for any person with a brain who watched that original source footage, aren't you giving away the fact that all you do is lie? That someone hands you a talking point, you've got your tonality, you hit the air and you go, all right, I'll go sell this. It's soulless.
Yeah. Well, let's, I actually thought Bill Maher's reaction to this was very interesting. Let's play that video, Natalie. It was the last one I sent you from the Vigilant Fox. Bill Maher actually.
Love Vigilant Fox.
Yeah, great account. Another great follow. But Bill Maher actually did have a shred of integrity with this one that I appreciate.
I woke up today to the headline that Trump had called for a firing squad for Liz Cheney. And this is what I really don't like about the media. No, he didn't. He did not. You don't have to move me to not like Donald Trump.
He says
more
so
than
many
I
shitty
already,
things. Why do you have to?
And by
do
the way,
that?
if you Pete don't realize it, well, here's what he said. He's criticizing him for being a war hawk. I mean, she is Dick Cheney's daughter. He said, she's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her. Okay. Let's see how she feels about it. You know, they're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, we'll send tens of thousands of troops right into the mouth of the enemy. Now, of course, he expresses himself horribly. He has to add she's a stupid person because he's a moron.
Trump knows what it's really like from Vietnam.
Okay.
Pause for a second.
Okay. Just to be clear.
Yeah, just pause the video,
This
Natalie.
is exactly what hippies always said. This is
okay, so I just, by the way, because we'll have the bigger conversation here, but I did just find something so interesting about that. that Bill Maher, of course, they can't even get through this and just have. Look, I'm giving him credit for having a little bit of integrity here, but it's amazing how even in those moments, then he's got to immediately cover it with this like, now you don't have to convince me to hate Donald Trump. And then his other guests like, I mean, he says so many stupid things. So like, they really shouldn't pick out this one, blah, blah. And then, of course, when he's done reading the very reasonable quote, did you catch what Bill Maher does? He goes, now, of course, he doesn't express himself well. He goes on to say she's a very stupid person because he's a moron. And then throws it over his guests. And you're like, dude, you just did the exact same thing. You just did the exact same thing that you're criticizing him for being. He said she's a very stupid person. And what'd you say? He's a moron. How are those different comments? How is what like it's so bizarre that people then go like, now of course he did call her a stupid person, and then he has to transfer to Vietnam. They have to try their best to then focus on anything else except the obvious implications. Anyway, let's keep playing the video.
I think that guest is Raskin, who's a congressman and the only person who's about equal level bad as Schiff when it comes to like just the typical Donald Trump January 6th overthrowing the country. That guy can't possibly be in. He's one of those characters.
All right.
Exactly what peaceniks always said. This is Fortunate Son, the song. It's like, you know what? It's very easy to sit in your building and send young men to die. Apropos of Ukraine, yes, because I don't know, that war doesn't look like it's going in the right direction.
Not at all.
But just so, just don't lie to me. I don't like Donald Trump. Don't lie to me and tell me he wants in front of a firing squad. He was saying something that, by the way, if it came out of the mouth, some of it, not the stupid part, again, sounds like what hippies used to say about
Bill,
not sending people to, yes.
Again, not even hippies.
I want to know how Raskin tried to win that one back over. He's such a slime ball.
But again, it's not even what hippies used to say. It's just what reasonable people used to say. This is what like center-left Democrats used to say. This is what everyone used to say. Like, yeah, there's a bunch of rich men in Washington, D.C. who want war because it's good for business, but they're not the ones who have to go. They're not the ones who have to go fight and die and kill people and get injured and, watch their buddy bleed out in their lap. Anyway, but it's just, there's something to like, even as you have this conversation, for your takeaway to be like, look, like, just don't lie to me because there's plenty of like legitimate stuff to get him on. So you don't have to lie, but it's like, none of them seem to have the conclusion of like, oh, wow, they're all a bunch of liars. They're all really comfortable with lying. And yet these are the same people who every single day say, we got to censor speech online because there's just all this disinformation. There's all these lies. Yet when it comes down to it, not only will they lie, they will lie in unison without a single, objector. Without anybody at these news companies. I mean, Bill Maher calls him out, nice, but he's on HBO. He's a comedian. It's like, you're telling me that like you have, if you remember, Rob, of course, through COVID and through, lots of different crises, they would always say, well, the problem is that like you guys aren't professional journalists. And literally talking about people like me and you, which like, fair enough, we're not, and you're like, hey, you don't have the resources. You don't have a news desk. You don't have fact checkers. You don't have, this $1 billion apparatus behind you. And yet all of that, for all of the fact checkers and all of the people who have centered their whole argument around the threat of disinformation, nobody at any of these news companies is like, hey, you can't, guys, this is just too dishonest. You can't run with that. I'm sorry. You're all making this claim that is not what happened. He did not threaten a former congresswoman. He did not say he wishes for her to be killed. He made a very reasonable point about how awful her policies are.
By the way,
I love it.
Just in terms of how simple of a point it is, I just put in, this is from Black Sabbath War Pigs. It's a great song. If you've never heard it, go get a life because you should have. But politicians hide themselves away or they only started the war. Why should they go out to fight? They leave that all to the poor. Yeah, time will Time will tell on their power minds making war just for fun, treating people like pawns in chess. Wait till their judgment day comes. If even Ozzy Osbourne gets it, it's not that novel or huge of a point.
We'd be better off with Ozzy Osbourne hosting Meet the Press. It would be a lot more entertaining too. Well, listen, man, this has been an unbelievable election to cover. It's been,
I got to be honest, less exciting than I was hoping for. There were a couple exceptions. There was the fact that they actually tried to kill Donald Trump, which was interesting.
That was pretty big.
The fact that they did one debate and Donald Trump fumbled in it. The fact that they hyped Kamala Harris for a little while as if she was the most incredible thing that ever happened in politics, and then watching her slowly flame out and Donald Trump re-energize from, kind of being bitched at after they shot at him, which I understand. But overall, not a single conversation of policy. There wasn't a single good debate. The media hammered the same stupid horseshit the entire time. Kamala Harris never said had anything to say and wasn't pressed enough to come off like a total dumbass, even though she is. So all in all, I'll give this like a C grade in terms of covering it through and through.
I think what happened was there was a little bit of an anticlimactic finish. Although again, we might be in for some fun tomorrow night. But it kind of peaked with Trump being shot at and Biden being forced out of the race and all of that stuff, But it's been wild. It's been wild to cover all of that. And there was something really unique about the Kamala Harris campaign and how undemocratic it was and all of that.
I'll change my opinion. It's because no one ever delves into the interesting shit. The deep state tried to kill Donald Trump. Donald Trump wouldn't even call it out. No one wants to talk about it. We moved on really quick from Donald Trump being shot at. They cooed Joe Biden. No one wants to talk about Joe Biden getting cooed.
Yeah.
They put up the world's biggest moron who couldn't possibly get into an interview. The media tried to cover for her, and they never explained why they tried to put up the world's biggest. It's like all of the more fascinating storylines kind of keep getting like pushed out of the door for me just to watch the people show up on their friendly shows and repeat the same horse shit that I've seen over the course of 3 months. So it's like everything that's kind of been interesting is off in the background. And even at the moment, I can't tell you, hey, if Donald Trump's in, is he rolling back Ukraine? Is he getting us a wall? Are they making any, you know what I mean?
Well, that's right. But again, that's kind of typical of, the presidential campaigns aren't really about the issues. But all of that stuff that you said, I mean, that's why people got to watch shows like this. And, that's why there's other, shows that are out there that are actually talking about the interesting things. Anyway, it's been interesting. I think it's going to be interesting to see the result. I mean, look, no matter what happens here, this is going to be a fascinating thing over the next few weeks and few months. And listen, man, I will just say it's been a hell of a year for me personally. And I got some more fun stuff coming up this week for you guys. I mean, I'm not traveling in December, so this is the end. This is me ending my year of big shows and traveling around over this next week. But thanks to everybody who's listened through all of this, and we'll continue doing our best to try to make sense of all. I hope you guys come watch the Patrick Bet David show tomorrow if you guys don't have anything else to do. And we're in for some fun.
Robbie the Fire, all one word on YouTube. The entire special's there. It's about 45 minutes long, something like that. And the first 12 minutes, which is kind of the election coverage, is up on Dave's channel. But go follow mine, go subscribe, run your mouth. It's all there. There's an archive of other stand-ups. So Robbie the Fire, all one word. Go watch it.
Hell yeah. And congratulations, dude. I'm proud of you, and I'm glad it came out so awesome and it's getting such a good response. Thank you to everybody for listening. We will catch you next time. Peace.